So ZOWIE does continue with the updates, and this time it's the FK series. ZOWIE sent me the FK1 Plus C, the FK1 C and the FK2-C. I'll quickly go through details and the updates, and then we compare shapes. If you haven't seen a video about the C series ZOWIE mice yet, the cable, the scroll wheel and the weight have changed. The new cable is very flexible, it should give you no trouble whatsoever, and it doesn't drag on your mousepad or your desk. It is pretty thick, but it's still easily compatible with mouse punches. In my opinion, most people should not need to paracord their new ZOWIE mice. One thing that's also worth mentioning about the cable is the massive upward angle on the stress relief. It's just really easy to set the mouse up in a bungee so that the cable does not touch your desk or your mousepad at all. So the weight on all these C series mice will be lower, and the FK2-C weighs about 72 to 73 grams on my scale. The FK1 then again is 76 to 77 grams, and the FK1 Plus is 80 grams. It's a nice improvement, especially as the old FK2 weighed about 80 grams. The sensor in the C series is still the 3360, and there are no issues with the performance, the polling rate is stable, the lift-off distance is under 1 DVD with the low setting, and there is no acceleration and no issues with the tracking. The click feeling is still pretty much exactly the same as on the FK2-B series. These are spammable, but they are not that easy to actuate. I do not have any issues with these in regards of tap firing in CS or spam clicking, but I would like these to be a little bit lighter. The click feeling on all of these models is pretty much the same, and the click feeling is very consistent, so it does not matter where you click the button from that much. But when the buttons are not separated from the shell, the further back you go, the harder these are to actuate. The side buttons feel exactly the same as on the FK-B series mice that I have. I would say that the feeling here is okay. There is some pre and post travel, but the click feeling is still tactile and crispy. These are good for games and general use. These are for sure not the best side buttons I've tried, but they are good enough. The scroll wheel then again is updated on the C series, so it's 24-step scroll wheel, but it's still quite loud, and the steps are very defined and tactile. Listen to this. I would say it's pretty loud. The feet are not 100% PTFE, and the glide is not fastest whatsoever. They are quite a bit slower than most pure PTFE feet, and the experience with some control pads is quite slow. But I do like these feet with some faster pads, for example like the Endgame Gear MPC 450 and the Artisan High-End. No matter what mousepad you use, the feel is going to be smooth and consistent, but with some of those control surfaces, it's gonna be slow. The stock feet are 0.6mm thick, but they are almost even with the base of the mouse, but yeah, there is like a slight difference of course. But this should not cause any kind of issues with any mousepad unless you use some weird surface that really wears out feet fast. So let's move on to shapes and start with the FK2. It's quite a low profile mouse that's fairly thin, but not that short. I'm a big fan of the shape, and there are a lot of mice that are inspired by the FK2 on the market today. And the same goes of course for the FK1. The FK2 can be very good for palm grip if you have small hands, and it's a very good claw and even pretty good fingertip grip mice for those people with medium and large hands. But for fingertip grip, I would suggest something that's even lighter in weight. There is some palm support on the bottom of your palm, but most of your palm is not going to be touching the mouse. This gives me good mobility, and the fact that the front is also low profile, it makes claw gripping the mouse fairly easy for me. And for reference, my hand size is 19 x 10 cm. The most similar mice in terms of the shape and hand feeling for the FK2 is the Ducky Feather, and the Xtrfy M42 is also fairly similar. With the FK2 there is less palm contact than with the M42, and then again the M42 is a fair bit thinner than the FK2. And it's also quite a bit shorter. The Ducky Feather and the ZOWIE FK2 are then again very similar in terms of hand feeling and size. They are pretty much the same length, they have the same height, and they are just as wide. The in-hand product feel then again is much higher on the FK2 than on the Ducky Feather. I would say the FK2 just feels way more premium. The plastic on the sides of the Ducky Feather, for example, it just feels fairly cheap, and it even has these holes on the sides. The coating on the FK2 feels more premium and it's much more grippier, but it does attract more fingerprints than the Ducky Feather. My favorite shape out of these mice is still the Xtrfy M42, but it does have those holes on the sides and on top of the mouse and pretty much everywhere, so it kind of does feel less premium than the FK2 for sure. And let's not forget that the ZOWIE quality control also seems to be top tier. I mean, they've made these shapes for years and years, so they've kind of learned. I would say these comparisons make the most sense with the FK2, so let's move on to the FK1, and this mouse actually has fair bit more kind of similar sized mice that can be compared. For example, the Model O, which is pretty much exactly the same as the FK1. Then we got the XM1, it's fair bit different, but let's compare that as well. Then we got the Razer Viper, and the Viper is like in between of the FK2 and the FK1. And although the Superlight is very different to the FK1, I'm gonna compare that as well. So the hand feeling for the FK1 and the Model O is pretty much exactly the same. I grip these the exact same way and they feel the same. Most of the difference here comes from the coating. The coating on the Model O is very cheap feeling and it's not very grippy to me, and it also has these holes on the top of the mouse. But I would say the sides on the mouse, they feel quite plasticky and quite cheap, and they are not very grippy. And then again on the FK1, the coating is again very grippy, and for that reason it's easier to lift the FK1 than it is to lift the Model O. Also, when my palm and my fingers sweat with the Model O, for some reason it gets very hard for me to grip the mouse and I can't really lift it that easily, and that's a big problem for me, as I recenter my mouse quite a lot after flicks and such. But of course, with the Model O wireless, we do have to remember that we get a wireless mouse for pretty much the same price. And it does have other advantages as well, as it weighs about 6 grams less and it has pure PTFE feet. Then again, when we compare the FK1 with the Viper Ultimate, the Viper Ultimate feels slightly smaller. The back of the mouse is more narrow, so the palm contact is different, and it's also thinner and shorter. The hump on both the Razer Viper and the FK1 is more towards the middle of the mouse. I still grip these mice the exact same way, but the FK1 feels larger. The XM1 then again feels very different in hand than the FK1. The hump on the XM1 is more pronounced and more towards the back of the mouse, whereas the hump on the FK2 is more towards the middle of the mouse, as I already mentioned, and it feels your palm less than the XM1. The FK1 is longer than the XM1, but they are pretty much just as wide. I also grip these mice the exact same way, but of course the hand feeling is going to be completely different because of the hump. And comparing the Superlight to the FK1 has way more curvature on the sides and it's lower profile. The hand feeling again is completely different, and I do not grip these two mice the same way. Most of the time I do enjoy a more aggressive claw with the Superlight. And that basically means that my ring finger and my pinky are more towards the back of the mouse like this. And then we still got the FK1 Plus left, but luckily there are not many mice that feel as large as this one. The FK1 and the FK1 Plus are the exact same length, but the FK1 Plus is higher profile and it's wider. It's only 2 mm wider and higher, but you will be able to feel the difference. At the moment, the most similar mouse I have to the FK1 Plus is just the FK1. And you can basically easily feel the difference that it's much bulkier than the FK1. I know a lot of CSGO pros use the FK1 and the FK2, but for example Simple has used the FK1 Plus for quite a while at some point. I wonder what's his hand size, because this mouse is quite large. Okay, enough with the comparisons, and I would say that the FK1 and the FK2 are the most popular mice among the series, and I would maybe say that the FK2 beats the FK1 just a slight bit. I actually do like both of these mice quite a bit, but the FK2 just fits my hand size and grip style quite well. For me, there is a bit less palm contact with the FK2 than there is with the FK1, and also it does feel thinner than the FK1. I feel that this gives me more mobility and helps me aim better. That being said, if I would use the FK1 for an extended period of time, I have no doubts that I would adjust to it. If I would rate these mice for specific grip styles and hand sizes, I would say that the FK2 is the best for medium and small hands if you claw or fingertip. Then again, if you have medium to large or large hands, you might want to pick the FK1 for palm grip, and if your hands are quite large, the FK1 will be the best for claw as well. But I would not necessarily recommend this for fingertip grip, even if you have large hands. And then for the FK1 Plus, I would say that it's for those people who have large hands and prefer larger mice. Then again, the thing for ZOWIE mice and the FK series is that the cost is 70 euros or USD, and you can pretty much get like the Model O wireless for the same price, or 15 euros or 15 USD more. And it's of course wireless and the same shape as the FK1. And then again, for the FK2, you can get a Ducky Feather or the Xtrfy M42 for cheaper. Most of the time I would recommend for you to go with a competitor product rather than the FK series. But if you want that high quality build like tank ZOWIE feel, you only have one option. I myself do love the FK2, and I've been a massive fan of the shape for a long time. Let me know what you guys think about the FK-C series. Do you think the 70 euro price is too high for a wide mouse these days? But that's pretty much it. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. If you enjoy my content, hit that subscribe button, and see you in the next one.